we are having a conversation with Professor Rajeeva Karandikar. He is the director of the Chennai Mathematical Institute. So let's start with from your early education. How did you get interested in mathematics?
Well, my father was a professor of mathematics and statistics. So, in a sense, I was born with it. In day-to-day life, my father would introduce mathematical concepts, and that's how I developed a liking for it, right from my childhood.
Okay.
And then in school, at the high school, when others who were liking mathematics were all talking about engineering, I didn't know what engineering was, but two things. I did not like, or I could not draw, and that was the important thing in engineering. That I knew.
I see.
Also, I knew that engineering is not mathematics. Mathematics is a small part of engineering.
True.
So I decided that no, I want to stay closer to mathematics, and that's why I did not join the engineering college, but chose to do a bachelor's in mathematics.
How did you get into the National Science Standard Scholarship? What did you do? I mean, I know they do experiments on sciences and things. What did you do in that?
No, actually, I was one of the few who wrote the so-called project report, as they used to call it, in mathematics. Okay.
Yeah, I'm interested in knowing what that was.
Yeah. So, what I see, my dad had brought various books for me, and these included what we may now call mathemagic books or mathematical tricks.
Oh yeah.
You know, you ask somebody a number, do this, do this, do this.
Martin Gardner style.
And then they tell you, and then you guess what the number is. So most of these books, they would tell these as facts, but they would not have a mathematical proof, for example.
Right.
Okay. So I took upon as project to pick such puzzles or tricks or some things like that, and give a mathematical explanation or a proof thereof as to why this happens.
What did that entail? You know, what do you get when you get into the National Science Standard?
Yeah. So in those days, the scheme, as it was called, the National Science Talent. So there was a written exam, and there was this project, and then followed by an interview.
Yes.
Those who were selected, they were told that if they pursue science education, they will get a fellowship. Everybody will get a fellowship.
Was that a substantial fellowship?
And 150 rupees in 1973, I think, was quite substantial.
Okay.
At that time, I mean, my parents were professors with 15 years, with 20 plus years of service, and I think I don't recall exactly, but I think the salaries were around 750 rupees. So it was like 1/5 of each of their salaries who were full professors. So I think it was a very substantive amount.
Okay. Then where did you do your undergraduate?
So undergraduate I chose to do in my hometown, which was Indore. In the college where my parents studied, where my grandfather studied and taught, my parents studied and
Didn't you want to do it somewhere else?
Actually, didn't give too much of thought, or my dad didn't suggest and I didn't think so. I stayed on there, and actually it was quite good in a sense. Later, when we'll talk about it, but later when I came to Indian Statistical Institute for masters, there were students from, in particular, Calcutta University who were joining, and I saw that I know more mathematics. I was better trained in mathematics than the students in Calcutta University, whether they did statistics honors or maths honors. So we are more trained in what we may now call the modern mathematics, as opposed to very old style mathematics. So
set theory and so on.
Yeah, so we already had introduction to set theory, we had a course in real analysis, we had matrices, we had abstract algebra, so I knew group rings, fields.
Okay.
I also knew linear programming.
That's unusual.
So for a BSc program in that era, it was rather unusual.
Yes.
And yet, I mean, apart from my father, who would teach me at home as well, but there were other teachers who were fairly competent. So they may not have been researchers, the other teachers, but they were very, very competent in teaching. So,
have you heard about the Indian Statistical Institute at that time when you were undergraduate students?
Yeah, in my second year, my dad told me about it.
Okay, then it's too late for BStat.
No, at that time I had no clue. I had not heard. And my dad knew, but maybe he didn't think about sending me then.
Okay.
But my
so how did you end up coming to the Indian Statistical Institute after your bachelor's degree?
Yeah, so as I said, my father having been in statistics as a subject, this was always on the cards. One of the options was on the cards.
Okay.
In fact, he said to me that when he finished his undergraduate in the mid-40s,
yes,
he had heard, and he wanted to pursue statistics, and at that time he had heard that the only place to pursue statistics was Calcutta.
I see.
And he wanted to go to Calcutta,
I see.
but my grandfather would have none of it, and he said, if you want to study, stay in Indore or go to Bombay. Calcutta is out of question, it is too far.
It was a foreign country.
Yeah. So this was always on the cards,
right.
but I think, as you very well know, I mean, the mid-70s or 70s were also the period of turmoil for Calcutta.
Very much so.
So probably why he didn't think of BStat may have been that reason. But what happened was that while I was doing my BSc, Professor Nadkarni, who hails from Indore, who was born and even he did his early college education in Indore, and then had gone to Bombay abroad, and then he was at ISI.
I see.
And
you knew about him?
Well, he was, my father and he knew each other. My father had kind of taught him in his intermediate years.
I see.
And later, at that point of time, he was on leave from ISI and had come to the newly established Indore University as professor. And then he and my father had reconnected.
I see.
So, he reassured my father that no, Calcutta is fine and ISI is fine, and just send him there, don't worry. So, I think earlier it was only one of the options. It became the top option with Professor Nadkarni telling my dad about how things were at ISI at that point and not to worry and all that.
Okay, so then you joined ISI in the MStat, and then you did what then was called APMS.
Yeah. So
how was that?
So
how was
Oh, it was great. I mean, simply great. After joining ISI, I must add that before joining ISI, I had my thing about writing proofs for mathematics and so on continued. And these things, many of them would take you to things like number theory or graph theory or stuff like that. What now we loosely call discrete mathematics.
Okay.
Also, some of the stuff my father was doing involved Galois fields, and he had told me about them, and I actually knew how to do computations in Galois field.
I see.
So my natural instinct at that point was what we may call today discrete mathematics.
Okay.
But I came to ISI, and then the ISI curriculum and so on took me to continue mathematics. And probability theory is the thing which I chose that I will do. I guess I like the subject, and as we all know, I mean, a lot of this is determined by who is teaching that subject. And
yes,
we have taught us. So, so while doing APMS, which I was enjoying, I decided that I have come to this place far away from home. I am liking the place. I'm liking the teachers, and there's a lot to learn. So why bother going anywhere? Just stay on here and do PhD.
Okay,
so that's how I decided.
Tell us how getting into the PhD program came about. Was there a formal process?
At that point of time in ISI, things were still fairly informal. And the way it worked, in later years I came to know about it even more. Around that time was that the specialization, what we call APMS, Advanced Probability Mathematical Statistics, it was meant for students who want to do research.
Right.
And then they are going through this 4+4, 8 courses during the year. And the faculty would, by talking to each other, figure out whether this particular student is good enough for a PhD or not.
Right.
And they would have made a judgment. And then if the student shows interest, and if they have said yes, they will admit. If not, they will tell the students how it. No. So, as you know, my sole classmate in APMS was Anirban, and both of us were very intense and very good students. We were doing every task assigned, we were doing on time, and so on. We were doing well in exams. So we did ask, but we knew that if we ask, we will be admitted. Okay, but we had not talked about it explicitly to anyone.
Okay.
And we had not applied anywhere, either of us.
Anywhere else?
Anywhere else. Not even to IIT.
Not even to IIT, yeah.
So the day after we finished our MSc final exams, I had stayed on in Calcutta one more day before going to Indore. And I and Anirban walked into the Dean Ashok Metra's office and told him sheepishly that we want to join here for research, and what do we do? He simply said, go out, write on a piece of paper what you told me and come back. So he went out, exactly wrote one sentence: we would like to join as a PhD student. Of course with address to properly and so on and so forth.
Right.
We gave it to him, he says, okay, good, see you on 1st August.
So that was it.
That was it. So things were that informal. Over time, even in ISI, things had become formal and it would not be. Now, of course, even if it is known that the faculty likes the student and he's very good and so on and so forth, he or she would have to write the entrance exam. There is no direct admission.
Actually, even at that time, I also joined in the economics and planning, and there was there was an interview. Yes,
I remember.
Yes,
you guys had an interview.
Yes, and some of us were strongly discouraged from joining the PhD program. So, I mean, the fact that you just breezed through is not, let's say, not common even at that time. Then after you joined your PhD program, what did you do? Did you have to do coursework?
No, the APMS curriculum as it was at that time, and it continues to be, was such that it is already research level courses for working in probability theory.
Yes.
Specifically. If you want to do something else, maybe you need to study more. But I think for anyone intending to do a PhD in probability theory anywhere across the globe, I think what I went through was the best graduate courses that anybody could think of.
That's for sure.
So therefore there were no formal requirement. So therefore I did not do any coursework formally as a PhD student, though there were seminars going on, not in probability theory, but let's say I remember is partial differential equations.
Okay.
And though not directly related, there is indirect relations, and in any case, good mathematics is always good. So I was a very serious participant in the lectures and seminars going on.
Were they the partial differential equation? Were they like seminar kind of things, or were they like course where they would get homework and so on?
No, it was seminar course.
Okay.
So it was intended for PhD students and other faculty members.
Okay.
And advanced, and there were no homeworks. But there used to be a lot of discussion. It is not like a lecturer standing up and giving lecture and walking away.
Okay.
But we used to have a lot of discussion at the end, and
Because we didn't have partial differential equation in earlier stages at all.
No, we did not have.
Yeah.
But it started at a high level.
Right.
So other students and other participants had studied it on their own. I had not.
Okay.
So I had to spend some extra effort in catching up with what others knew.
Right.
But
right. And then how did you go about choosing your PhD topic and so on?
Well, as I said, the subject and the advisor got self-selected based on the curriculum. So I had decided probability theory, and I'd gone to a bureau saying that I would like to work with him. He told me that no, in ISI we don't decide such things right away. By and by you start reading stuff, you this, etc. But because of my science talent fellowship, there was a formal paperwork needed.
Also, the science talent scholarship was tenable until your PhD as well.
That's correct. So therefore I asked Bureau to sign it nonetheless, and he said that okay, I'm signing it, but it neither binds me nor does it bind you. But I guess that became the default option, and we continued to interact, and I actually started with the idea that I would work in filtering theory.
Okay.
And so to work in filtering theory at that time, one had to study stochastic calculus. So I started studying stochastic calculus.
Of which you didn't have any in APMS at all?
No. So ended up, that itself was quite tedious at that time, very difficult, not much material in English available.
I see.
A lot of stuff in French.
Okay.
In English, there was a Avner Friedman's book, but that was for only Brownian motion integration. Kalyanpur had just finished his book on stochastic filtering theory, and of which a pre-publication type manuscript was with B.V. Rao.
Okay.
So he gave me that to read.
Okay.
There may have been one or two other sources in English with some parts, and then there was literature in French.
Okay.
Strasbourg seminar volumes and whatnot.
But you didn't know any French?
I did not know any French, so one day Vivira asked me to read something, and I come back to him with a very, very sorry face saying that I can't do anything because it's in French. So he said, okay, sit down. He gave me a half-hour tutorial on how to read mathematics written in French. The 20 common words or phrases which I may come across and what do they mean.
Okay.
Plus stuff like adjective comes before the noun and adverb comes before the verb rather than after. I'm now confused. That's something different from English. Yeah.
Yes. All the Romance languages have the same.
So he gave me a half-hour tutorial and he said, now go and read. So
and you could.
And with some struggle, some efforts, with the context.
Right.
You see, so people say, oh, so now you can read French. I would say, in fact, I would qualify by saying, I can read probability theory material written in French. I won't even say mathematics. So, because the terms, phrases and so on,
Sure.
A new term, I would not know whether it's a new word or is it a new term or what.
And in those days, you didn't have Google Translate.
You have Google. Now life is easy. But I learned it the hard way. So in fact, one of the books I have read the most is a book in French. There's a lecture notes in maths by Jacot on martingale problems and stochastic calculus.
Right.
I gave lectures on that, year-long series of lectures.
But the students didn't know French either.
No, so the lecture was in English. Okay. I can't lecture in French even if the student knew French.
So then what did you do after you learned all that stuff?
So while learning itself, what happened was that various questions cropped up.
Okay.
And I eventually ended up answering some of those, and that became my thesis.
Okay.
So
did you have any false starts?
Well, of course I did. The first false start was I tried to do something which was not true.
Okay.
One silly technical mistake and that too in areas where we at ISI used to think we are the ustads, we can't make any mistake. It was a mistake in set theory, measure theory kind of a mistake.
Okay.
Logical mistake. But one mistake and then I could do wonders. Of course that was too good to be true.
Right.
So Vardhan, I'd sent this to Vardhan and he didn't reply, but on a visit to him, when I met him, first thing he said is, oh, what you say is not true. I don't know what mistake it is, but here is why it is not true. And he explained to me in 5 minutes why what I was doing is not true.
And then you knew what the mistake was?
No, then I didn't know. Then I went back and worked out and I figured out where the mistake was. So the second false start, it's not a false start, but false start as far as thesis is concerned.
Right.
Was that I came up with a conjecture on my own and connecting two supposedly very distinct notions. And in today's language, later now I know it can be kind of connected to the fundamental theorem of asset pricing. Of course, I knew none of that then.
Right.
But being martingale representation and being having a completeness of.
But you eventually wrote a book on option pricing.
Yes. So this connection was something which, in purely probabilistic part thereof, I had thought of it on my own while thinking about something, and was trying to prove the same. Proved one half, easy half. The difficult half, I proved some parts, and one part I was struggling. And while trying to settle that part, I only discovered that not only was the whole thing done, the proof was also exactly the same. The part that I had worked out was exactly the same. So I couldn't even get claim any credit for an alternate proof of a known result.
But at least you knew in your hearts that you have done something.
Yes. So at least I was happy that the first one was a wrong theorem that I proved. Now at least I am proving right theorem. So what if it is proven by someone else?
Okay. So what did you do eventually your thesis on?
So thesis was again on, as I said, on some aspects of stochastic calculus. What I call the pathwise formulae in stochastic calculus, which are important from any kind of a statistical or engineering applications of stochastic calculus, because in any of these you want to compute your estimate or you want to trigger your action based on an observation path. and the formula will contain a stochastic integral or a solution to a stochastic differential equation. And when it was stressed in those days in the books that these are defined only as limits in L2 and not pathwise. And just like Fourier transform, when it is an L2 Fourier transform, talking about Fourier transform at a point does not make sense. It's only a sense as a functional.
Right.
The same thing was being stressed in stochastic calculus, but then for statistical application or for control theory, you needed it at an observation path.
Okay.
And what I did was not in the for the most general framework, but for a large class of integrands, and which include various things which were used in practice, one could talk about this pathwise formula. That was my thesis on.
Okay. Did it lead to some publications?
Oh yeah, plenty.
Okay.
So fortunately, plenty in good places.
That's good.
And so that way I've been lucky in the sense, as we all know, research, you need to work on the right problem, you need to think, should not be hitting your head against the wall.
Yes.
Even when you get success, it should be something others be interested in listening to.
Yes.
If nobody is interested in it, doesn't matter if it's great work, doesn't pay any, neither get publications nor you get anything out of it.
Right.
So fortunately, I was lucky enough to get publications, enough people interested in what I was doing.
Right.
So
I know that very well because the first result I proved, I was so excited. Well, I shouldn't say first result because you know about the first result. The second result I proved, I was very, very excited about that and took it to a professor and he said, this is not interesting. And I had no idea how to address that sort of question.
Yeah.
So that's...
These are just by luck, I guess. So.
Yeah. And then, which year was that?
So the thesis was in 1981.
Okay.
And
so you were done rather quickly, no?
Yes, I was done rather quickly.
Yeah.
Especially given the 2 false starts.
Yes.
Then the whole thing converged very, very quickly once. So you see those 2 false starts, but I was reading a whole lot of stuff and thinking a whole lot of stuff. So when I got the right problem, I had found all the tools in my hand to just start writing proofs. So.
Right.
After that, in '82, I went to North Carolina as postdoc Chapel Hill to work with Kalyanpur.
Right.
And
how did that come about?
Kalyanpur was director of ISI, as you know, when we were doing masters.
Right.
But we had very little to do with him other than inviting him for our annual function and stuff like that.
Right.
No academic interaction per se. But since he is a big shot in probability theory, I used to routinely send him reprints of things which I was writing, including the wrong one, the false start.
Okay.
And write letters to him saying, this is what I am doing, etc., etc. He used to write back saying, yes, encourage me and say, keep in touch and let me know as you are close to finishing. So I wrote to him and then he just invited me. So that's how it came about. And
so what was your, you didn't go as an assistant professor or something?
No, at that time he and along with the 2 other colleagues, they had a big grant of what was called Center for Stochastic Processes. And that gave me equivalent of a beginning faculty salary in the US then, and with no teaching.
That was lucky.
So it was very lucky. Very lucky. And so I had all the time, and the other plus point was that it was not only me, but they had money to support something like 12 such positions.
Oh wow.
So for people within US, there were different deals. Some of them were on sabbatical, only their travel and something was paid, whatever. But they were they supported 12 visitors at a time, and they rented, because the department didn't have space, they rented a space in a commercial building to house all of us. And
so you got to interact with a lot of...
Yeah, so all 12 of us, nobody was teaching, so that gave us a lot of time, and it was like transporting the ISI atmosphere of coffee club and, talk to each other on unrelated, it may not be relating to exactly what I am doing, but I talk about my stuff, they talk about their stuff, I got to know this, that, so lots of interesting...
that sort of atmosphere is very hard to get, unless you go to Institute of Advanced Studies or something.
Yes. So there were one such... interaction and friendship that developed, which later led to joint work. This was with Lawrence Dehaan.
Okay.
He visited me later in Delhi and I visited him in Holland. He used to work in extreme value theory.
Yeah.
So when he visited Delhi, we worked on stochastic differential equations. When I visited Holland, we worked on extreme value theory.
No, later on he was involved in the project of raising the dike.
Oh yeah. I know all about it because I continued interacting with him and meeting him and how all these things work. So it was my first exposure to how a theoretician turns to the applied world.
No. Now it has taken even more importance because of the climate change and raising sea level and all that sort of stuff.
Yes. So Lawrence had told me all about the height of the dike issue and so on. The other interesting conversations during those coffee club at Center for Stochastic Process, North Carolina, early 80s, was with Robert Woolford, Duke University.
Yep.
So Jim Berger is a close friend of Robert Woolford. They were grad students together.
Okay.
And later.
But they were both at Duke at that time.
No. Jim Berger was at Purdue.
Okay. Yeah.
But later, soon after that, they established the Center for Decision Sciences at Duke, and the main impetus was that Robert would his friend to move to Duke. And so. And then the two of them have written a book which is quite well known called on the likelihood principle.
Okay.
And in the preface, the authors have thanked Rajeeva Karandikar for delightful discussions on various stuff. So various people ask me, hey, when did you meet Jim Berger? He thanks you in the book. I said, I have not met him. So they didn't tell me that it's a book jointly authored with Woolford. So when I saw the book, then I knew.
That's funny.
So these were very interesting years, and
so how long were you there for?
So for 2 years.
Okay.
And then I returned to India.
Did you make a conscious decision that you wanted to return to India?
It was absolutely a conscious decision, heart frozen. I did not even want to explore other options. I can't say why. Very difficult.
Yeah.
But when my friends asked why, these friends who were staying back, I told them back that you have to tell me why you are staying back rather than me telling you why I am going back. So that's how I was, but that's how it was. And I must say that I never regretted the decision to come back.
Okay.
One thing I must add, that I knew that returning to India doesn't mean that doors to the West are closed.
Okay.
I was going to remain active in research. I was going to a very vibrant place.
Yeah.
And I knew that interaction with the rest of the world will continue.
But did you make up your mind that you are going to come back to the Indian Statistical Institute, or did you think of other places?
No. Even before I left ISI, I had kind of made up my mind. And kind of talked about it also. In fact, before I left, Professor K.R. Parthasarathy was trying to persuade me not to go abroad for postdoc and stay on, and he would offer get me a faculty position.
Okay.
And when I asked Professor J.K. Ghosh, Professor Ashok Maitra, Professor B.V. Rao, all of them said that no, it's a good idea to go out of the institution.
Get an exposure
get wider exposure, and at a point you want to return, you should be most welcome. You have done good work, and we hope you will do good work, and then there should be no problem. So in that way, there had been some talk about this. So I kind of took it for granted that. So I didn't write to anywhere else. I just wrote to ISI, and then they hired me.
So you were hired as an assistant professor?
No, I was hired as associate professor.
How did that happen?
Well, it was Kalyanpur, when we were talking. I said that I'm going to write to ISI for a position. And by then what had happened was that my thesis work had appeared and in good places, including in annals and Zeitschrift, which were like top 2 journals. And then my work with Kalyanpur had also gone well.
Did you also become the associate editor of Annals at that time?
No, not that time. That was later. That was to come later.
Okay.
But so that also had generated good publications. Again in top journals. So when I talked to Kalyanpur about applying to ISI and so on, he says yes, but he said I insist that you must apply for associate professorship, and I'm going to write a suitable letter for that.
Okay.
So this idea of applying for the next position came from Kalyanpur, and he knew enough about ISI system that the flexibility is there, and so on. So that's how it came about.
Okay. So you joined directly as associate?
I joined directly as associate professor, something which is today unthinkable at ISI. I'm a member of the council, member of umpteen committees, and we are now writing down rules which make this impossible. So I look back and I wonder and this was within 3 years of my submitting of my thesis. I had joined as associate professor at ISI.
Yeah.
Something which is unthinkable today.
Yeah.
Too many rules have been written down.
Yeah. But did you want to? I mean, you joined IIT Delhi. Was that part of?
Well, I joined IIT Delhi because that was the only feasible point in our choice set. My wife, Lata, at that time was working as a journalist with Times of India Group, now Bharat Times, in Mumbai.
Okay.
She was on leave from there when she came to US. So at that point, Times of India did not have offices all over the country as they have today, offices and editions. Bombay and Delhi.
So those
were the only two options. And for me, Calcutta, Bangalore and Delhi were the only three options. So the only common options was Delhi. So neither Lata nor I had any affinity for Delhi. But that was the only feasible choice, and that's how we chose. If they had a Bangalore edition which came up within 2 years of me returning, very likely we would have gone to Bangalore. Kalyanpur wanted me to go to Bangalore because that was his baby.
He started the Bangalore Center.
He started the Bangalore Center. So life would have evolved differently.
Yes, definitely.
But
and then how did you get involved in, at that time you were doing theorem proof and that sort of thing, hardcore theory.
Yeah.
And how did you come about doing something outside of your natural habitat, shall we say?
That had to wait for quite some years. I returned to Delhi in '84.
Yeah.
And at least 10 plus years after that, in fact 12 years after that, I continued to be in my theorem proof world, completely oblivious of the rest of the world. And I actually used to think that I am useless for the rest of the world. What do I talk to them about? I could,
There's no common language.
No common language. If somebody would have invited me to give a general speech, I wouldn't know what to say. Because I could give a technical talk, I could give a good talk, explain a theorem, all that. I can explain why a certain definition is made in a certain way, all that. But beyond that, nothing. So I think I was pretty happy in this world. I can even say till maybe about early 90s, certainly I was very happy. In mid-90s, interacting with friends actually, I was working on various different themes, but all in theory. So as I was telling the other day, in 96 I went I planned a 7-week trip to various places. And in all I was giving 6 talks on 6 totally different themes involving 5 joint authors. so I was on a high in that sense. It's not that I did not have enough to do, that's why I turned to applied work. So, but at the same time there was always a thing that, more of the same. One more paper, one more theorem. It was not giving me the same kick as it gave me in my PhD years.
I could have told you that as in commerce, marginal utility keeps diminishing.
I studied that. You forget that I took courses in economics so I know the diminishing law of diminishing marginal utility. I knew the law, but I was feeling it as opposed to a theorem or as opposed to a postulate or a law. I could feel it myself, and so I had this itch. But then I also had that, I've been a theoretician. Who will want to take me on for an applied project? And that's when, through a friend, Yogendra Yadav approached somebody at ISI, and that friend then asked me if I would like to get involved with cephology. I didn't even know the word cephology meant. That election-related work, statistics, survey. So I said yes. And my first talk with Yogendra on phone, I told him that, well, I'll get involved, happy to get involved. I've always been interested in politics. But I told him that I have never done any applied work whatsoever. After my MSc practicals,
these involve numbers.
Which involved actual, supposedly, some cooked up numbers and getting some number crunching. I had not done any number crunching whatsoever.
That didn't deter him?
That didn't deter Yogen. He says, well, if you are convinced that you are interested, let's start. One important point was when we had this conversation, this was, I remember the time point, this was August 97. The previous elections, the United Front government had taken over in summer of 96.
Right.
So elections were only due
for another 4 years.
In 2001.
Yeah.
And this conversation we were having in 97. So that gives us enough time to experiment. He says, oh, don't worry, we have lots of data, we can experiment, we can build models, this, that. He was in Delhi, I am in Delhi, so
Right.
So we said, okay. And actually, since the time frame was long, we didn't even bother to, we met physically once. I went to his institute, met him, chatted up. And then, before we knew it, the government had fallen, and the elections were looming large, and then we had to start the war right away. So it was an interesting journey, and well, if the early experience had not been a reasonable success, I would have stopped then and there. But that was a reasonable success.
Right.
So that opened the door for election work. Also, I got noticed.
Yes.
So few people approached me with some applied problems.
That had nothing to do with
That had nothing to do with elections, but I got noticed.
Yes.
I did an opinion poll for India Today.
Right.
I was on Doordarshan channel talking about stuff.
Right.
So I got noticed.
Right. So what are other kinds of things you got involved other than?
Well, some of the things were, in a sense very routine, but very interesting nonetheless. One thing I distinctly recall was a paper cutting project. So paper mills, they manufacture paper in a fixed size, and their consumers want, or they put orders for requirement under different sizes, and then they need to cut the sheet, the big sheet that they have produced. And the obvious thing is you want to minimize wastage.
Right.
You want to fit as much as you can on a big sheet.
Right.
Okay. And it was interesting. There is a mathematical optimization. There is also a little bit of statistics, because you can anticipate some demand based on historical demand.
Okay.
So you know a certain such shape or certain such size is popular, and even if you cut some and keep it today, sooner or later order is going to come. Whereas some sizes there is only one client who orders such things, and you never know when next he is going to order.
Right.
So taking all this into account, building a simple model which can be implemented. So the simple problem, but it translates into good money for the end user. So starting with this, then there was a thing which involved a legal dispute, and it involved in sampling and interpretations of sampling and fraud detection.
Okay.
Claiming that what other side data is showing is fraud is not really a result of sampling. So this was a legal dispute which involved statistical issues.
Did your reading Perry Mason come into play here?
Well, not here. But since you asked, I have told you many stories. So the reading of Perry Mason actually came into effect as a part of disciplinary proceedings within ISI.
Okay.
So without getting into details, like other government entities, if a certain employee of the organization has not performed as expected, or has done something which is not acceptable to the organization, there is a system of constituting an inquiry into the incident or the event, and then in one such instance, since I was one of the people who were very upset, and I protested to the director Ashok Maitra that something must be done, this cannot be allowed. He promptly constituted an inquiry committee and named me what is called presenting officer, which is the equivalent of prosecution lawyer. So in the inquiry committee proceedings, my reading of Perry Mason came in very handy, because it's kind of a quasi-judicial process, and you follow all the judicial process of witness, cross-examination, this and that. And a few times I did raise objections to the other side doing, and what the committee was wanting to do. And when they said no, I said, we'll record that I objected and you have overruled. At which point they changed their decision. So lightly, one of the inquiry officers, which is the equivalent of judges, who had also been my teacher in their stead, he asked me in the evening over tea, we knew that you are good in mathematics and statistics, but we didn't knew with this aspect of law, where have you picked up from? And that's when I said Perry Mason. But nonetheless, being aware, what I can say is that being, let's say, by reading fiction like Perry Mason or other fiction, being aware of the rest of the world. So I was on one hand immersed in theorem proof and so on, but I was not this typical mathematician who is cut off from the rest of the world. I was very much aware with the rest of the world. I could relate to the rest of the world. And that came in handy because otherwise I would not have been able to carry out a dialogue with the real world.
So how did you go jumping from the academic world all the way to commercial deep end, so to speak?
Okay. So as I was doing this applied work, interacting with industry, with television channel, media, I also realized that, even if I didn't care for money, if I offered my services for free, I would not be valued.
Right.
Unless I charge good amount of money, I would not be noticed by the top boss.
Right.
And I would not get the value. Otherwise, money has come and told. When they're paid through their nose, they know that this advice is valuable.
Yes, that's what economics tells us too.
Yes, I discovered it. And I wanted to practice it. But these things were becoming rather difficult within the ISIFO.
Okay.
There are rules for consulting, the amount of time you can spend, the amount of money you can charge.
So you realize you really have to go out.
And after all this, you still needed a permission from the director, and there were no time limits set upon the director by when he has to decide.
Okay.
So
he just dragged on.
So early years there was no problem, but nonetheless all this was always iffy.
Okay.
And then at one point of time it became almost untenable, and that was very surprising because this was not even a project with a private company. The thing came to a blow almost when it was a project involving Indian defense and cryptography.
Okay. How did you get involved in cryptography?
Well, again, it is a friend who got me involved.
You have friends in high places.
Yeah, friends in good places and high places, and doing interesting stuff. So, Bimal, who is a close friend of mine and yours, and who is now the ISI director, he had gotten into cryptography. He applied for a crypto project with the defense, and he had to sign a paperwork, etc., saying that confidentiality, that he would not talk about it with anyone who is not involved in the project.
Okay.
And it was singleton set, so that meant he cannot talk with anyone.
Right.
So Bimal, he had come to Delhi to submit the project, and he says, "Hey Rajeev, I'm going to put your name as a co-investigator." I said, "Okay, but what does it involve?" He says, "Well, nothing." I said, "Okay, you can put, but now you tell me what the project is about, because only then I can give you meaningful feedback if you do talk to me."
Right. Right.
So that's how he told me what this whole thing is about, and he got me involved.
Right.
And one thing led to the other, and along with him I got involved with this organization under Navy. And this was a project with Navy, this organization, and the then ISI director was dragging feet in even approving that.
Okay.
I told them I don't need money, but they said that they cannot bring in this advice internally unless they have commissioned it under a project.
Right.
So these things kind of, I said, okay, enough is enough. Let me just plunge into full-time doing. I also got involved in
software
development.
Right.
So as you know, your teacher and my friend, it was T. Krishnan, he did not teach me directly, but he had post-retirement and been working with this crane software for the software SysStat. And he had sought me out to build a model, to implement this thing in probability called Markov chain Monte Carlo module for SysStat.
Right.
So I had done that for him, and in the process I had learned some ropes about software development.
So you worked as sort of a one-off project for...
Yeah, I worked as a one-off project first, and that's how I got known to them, and they got known to me.
Right.
And when I was exploring the options of consulting or something else, moving out of ISI, they showed a lot of interest, made a very attractive offer.
Right.
And attractive not just monetary terms, but they said that essentially you can do what you want. You want to go and attend a conference, you do it. You want to go and give lectures, you do it. You are invited to be on some important committee, you do it at your own. So
Well, that's very uncommon for.
Yeah, that is definitely very uncommon, but that was the flexibility and good money, I must add.
Yeah.
And I thought they in fact called it, and they wanted to start business in analytics, which the first time I heard the word analytics.
Okay.
This was 2006.
Right.
Okay. And in fact, my designation was Executive Vice President Analytics Practice. So I first thought that some typist has so they were a bit early on the curve, and they really could not market the analytics to the world. And so while the software development business went on well, the analytics practice didn't really take off.
Right.
They were maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of its time. By 2009, this word and this theme had become popular, but by then Cranes was in financial difficulty, and so I decided to move out, explore other options. That's when CMI's option showed up.
How did that come about?
Well, Professor Seshadri, when he had established CMIs, particularly when he started the undergraduate program, he had called me to come and give lectures. I really don't know how he heard of me. One possibility is Balaji, because before coming to work with Seshadri, Balaji had briefly joined as a PhD student at ISI.
Okay.
And when I had just joined as a faculty member.
Okay.
So he knew me then.
Okay.
But through that or otherwise, I don't know. But Professor Seshadri had called me and I had come.
What did you give your lectures on?
So to these BSc students, probably Professor Seshadri wanted to bring a different color to the students of mathematics.
Okay.
So though he himself was not into such things, so one trip I talked about elections, another trip I talked about option pricing, something I had gotten into.
Okay.
So this aspect of Professor Seshadri, that wanting to bring a little bit of diversity, to get students to know that there are other aspects to mathematics than algebraic geometry, algebraic topology. So this thought has been there. So he did call me. I did talk to these 2 early batches of students.
Right.
And he would tell me that, oh, Rajeev, you should come here.
Okay.
I would just say, we'll see. I had no intention of moving to Chennai.
Yeah.
And that continued. In 2008, there was a discussion in Bangalore on future of mathematics in India.
Okay.
With Professor Narasimhan, Seshadri, Raghunathan, all the Ramanan and
all the big names in
mathematics in India, and Kalyan Sinha, Rodham Narasimha, the ISI, TIFR, and some of the others were all involved. And at that point, because I was at Cranes, I was called in as an industry representative.
I see.
And I made a strong pitch at that point that all our master's program in India address those who want to do research.
Right.
We do not address those who do not want to do research but want to learn mathematics, or who start off with the aim of doing research, but in a year in masters they realize that this is not their cup of tea.
Right.
We don't care what happens to them.
Right.
And what I thought was that we should give an avenue for such people.
Right.
That they are still valuable to the society.
Sure.
Industry would be happy to have them.
Right.
If only we orient them correctly.
Right.
And that we should have such a program which de-emphasizes theorem proof and makes the students aware of
the applications.
Yes. What potential is there, and some concrete case studies, examples, whatnot.
Yes.
So somewhere something in between an MBA program and a standard MSc program.
Right.
In MBA, what happens is that everything is superficial, at least in my view.
Yeah.
And they may not get into depth in anything.
Right.
Whereas in MSc, you only go in depth and you don't care what happens with the rest of the world. So somewhere in between.
Right.
And there is space for MSc, there is space for MBA, and there is space for this intermediate thing in the world.
How did your talk go with the big?
Well, it was mixed reactions. That I can see from the faces, Some of them, as soon as I said de-emphasize theorem proof, they lost interest in whatever I have to say. Some of the others, my friends and are a few years younger, they were listening intently only to come and get into an argument with me at the end, so that's why they were listening intently. There were some who maybe agreed with me, and I could see nodding heads.
Right.
But Professor Seshadri, at the coffee time, came up to me and said, I know you are working with the company, and if I ask you to come now, you won't come. But come and join the academic council and help us design a program that you outlined.
So you joined the academic council of
yes.
Chennai Mathematical Institute.
Yes. And make trips here to interact with the faculty and try to design such a program.
Right.
By the time it was time to launch the program, the cranes was in difficult times.
Yeah.
I was exploring other options, and since I had been interacting with CMI and Sheshadri and others, Madhavan specifically,
right.
This became a potential place to come.
Right.
So, in fact, I remember, and I must add, Pratik, my son, decided to join here for Master's PhD in Computer Science.
But that was before you made your decision.
Yeah. So, 2009, Pratik was joining here. I came here to, with Pratik and to leave him here.
Okay.
And I came to meet Sheshadri to pay my regards and respects.
Right.
And as we were chatting, this time, before he said that you should move here, we were talking about other things. And once again he said the same thing, no, Rajeev, you should move here. And I had not thought well at that point. I mean, I started thinking about moving out of cranes. But in a lighter vein, I told Sheshadri, be careful in making such offers now because I might just say yes. Well, that gave opening, and then Sheshadri followed it up. I mean, he would not let me go.
Okay.
So he continued to follow up and say that if you're thinking about it, then you must do it.
Right.
And I did think about other options.
Right.
But by November that year, I made up my mind that I'm coming here.
Okay.
And then, before I made up my mind, Sheshadri also said that there is a possibility that we may want you to come here as director. Is that fine with you? I said, yeah. But there was a clear understanding that I'm coming here as a professor. If they want me as director, fine. If not, fine. But I'm coming as a professor.
Right.
So after I came in, within few months, they did make up their mind and then asked me if I would want to take over as director, which I happily did. After coming here, in the first 3 months, I had taken a measure of the place internally now.
Right.
And I was quite happy.
Right.
It's a newer place, smaller place, lesser history.
Right.
Things fairly at an informal level.
Right. I guess the other thing that to me is interesting is this private-public partnership.
Yeah. So, private-public partnership model, that's how it started. It started as a private thing and then grew into public-private partnership model.
Right.
So that's the interesting part, and we knew that there is potential in exploring that further.
Right.
I mean, after taking charge as director, I realized that other activities are going on fine. So there are two things I should put my attention to.
Okay.
One is to put CMI as a big name in what we may call industry interaction. We may call it consulting, we may call it high-end consulting, whatever. But in academia industry interaction, especially in mathematical science, that this should become known in that area.
Right.
That was one of the things I took up.
Right.
And other is to stabilize the funding situation. Be completely secured by becoming a government institution or getting secured by getting a huge chunk of corpus from private sector.
Right.
We are trying at all fronts.
Okay.
And there are ups and downs. Sometimes something seems like happening, something's not happening.
Right.
But as you know, just recently we have got a big boost from Infosys, support from Infosys, and a good corpus amount from Infosys.
Right.
And we do hope that while the government funding continues for our things, for the one part of the activities, Infosys as well as other corporate world will give us money for the growth areas that we want to go in, specifically the the faculty industry interaction, and attracting talent from across the globe to come to CMI. Because in mathematical sciences we don't really need any huge equipment. What we need is human capital, and we need is interactivity with the world. And given all the internet and connectivity and whatnot, nothing has till now replaced face-to-face interaction.
Correct.
So for joint work to go on and to become aware or so on and so forth, I think getting leading people to come and visit CMI from just for a seminar to spending months to spending a year on one hand, and for our people to travel and so on. Both these are important. And this private money coming in with not much tax can go in a long way to facilitate this part and to set up as a seed money for the academia industry interaction.
Where do you see CMI to go in the future?
Yeah, so one thing is, of course, the research and teaching aspects we should continue to be our strength. In teaching, I can see that we need to expand our...
So unlike other institutions of this sort, I guess CMI and also ISI is that there is undergraduate teaching.
Yes, there is undergraduate teaching which is taken seriously. It is at undergraduate where we are getting best students. I can say that though I didn't come as an undergrad student, but the best students that ISI has got over the years, predominantly, I'm not saying all, but if one looks at proportion, they have come from BStat stream, and later BMath has added to that stream, and now the BSc Maths here. So you see, that is where the filtering takes place, and that's where we need to attract talent, and so undergrad teaching is an integral part, and this is where now I see that there are a large number of cases where a friend says, talk to my son who is interested or daughter who is interested in maths, or a friend's friend, So I've interacted with quite a few students in class 11, class 12. I can see it's not as an interview, but just by interacting, that they have spark in mathematics. They are genuinely interested in mathematics. They have a reasonable exposure to mathematics.
They just needed a nudge.
And no, they have a nudge also, but they can't make it to ISI or to CMI because of the competition.
I see.
So though the number of students wanting to join ISI and CMI is small, but we also admit small numbers. So between ISI and CMI and BStat, BMath, CMI all put together, we are still admitting maybe those who join, about 80 to 90.
So for a country of 1 billion people, that's a very small number.
So there are good students who would gain from this, but they are unable to crack to get into this top 90 who are getting admitted these places. So there is a need to expand.